And how council can establish its own rules as its own procedures. So,
When you have established that rule?
well, it says you can establish the rules, and the organization. Charter says you can establish rules.
That's January.
It doesn't say that January.
The November 1st, 2022 meeting of the City of Oneonta Common Council is called order. Roll.
Mayor Dragon.
Here.
Councilmember Murphy. Councilmember Davies.
Here.
Councilmember Ritzberger.
Here.
Councilmember Carter. Here. Councilmember Carson.
Here.
Councilmember Harrington.
Here.
Councilmember Ratcliffe.
Here.
Councilmember Doug. Here.
Everybody wishes to join me in the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I'd like to take just a moment to honor former council member Steve Pender, who passed away unexpectedly. And then we'll take a moment. Thank you very much. All right. We have with us electronically Jonathan Gibbs, partner of DSP and Company. And we get a short presentation, Jonathan, and the floor is yours.
Thank you all so much for having me, and especially thank you for having me electronically here. It's a bit of a drive from Albany, especially late at night. And I actually hit a deer going to a client last week, so my vehicle is not exactly doing so well right now. So it's especially fortunate and thankful to have you all here via Zoom. So as you mentioned, my name is Jonathan Gibbs. I'm from BST. We are the independent audit firm of the city. The city council appoints us, and we annually perform all required audit reports and procedures in order to comply with the city's financial statements as well as the federal single audit. We began our work all the way back in May. And through June, July, and August, we completed both the financial statements as well as the city's federal single audit prior to issuing the city's final financial statements and single audit report prior to the September 30th deadline in accordance with the federal government filing requirements. So today we have 4 deliverables that we have prepared and provided to you folks on the council that I would like to briefly discuss. In general, though, I'd like to start out just by saying this is another successful audit of the city, which has become kind of what I've had a similar report annually. We have no findings within the financial statements, no internal control deficiencies, no findings within the single audit report. And there are no matters that are required to be communicated to you folks in your roles as those charged with governance over the city's financial statements as well as their internal controls. So previously, we provided you with bound reports as well as PDF copies of all of the items that we've presented to you and gone finalized. And I just want to start with the financial statements. We issued a clean opinion, an unmodified opinion over the financial statements of the city. The report itself has been changed around a little bit in terms of how the paragraphs are ordered in comparison to prior years. If you were to take a look at the city's financial report in previous years, it's been changed a little bit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards. However, the content has not changed, and that content of which is to say that we issue unmodified clean opinions over all reporting units of the city's governmental activities, the city's business type activities, in addition to the notes to the financial statements and the required supplementary information. Pages 7 through 15 are the management's discussion analysis. This is prepared by the finance department to discuss the current year of the city, in addition to some other qualitative information that's useful for the reader of the financial statements. Page 16 through 17 is the statement of net position as well as the statement of activities. These are the governmental activities of the city. And prior to, just after that, at pages 18 through 21 are the governmental financial statements. These are prepared on the modified accrual basis of accounting, and these are your fund financial statements. So just taking a quick read through these items, the total governmental funds fund balance decreased about $4.4 million to about $10.2 million at December 31st of 2021. This is principally the result of the capital projects fund as the city continues its capital expenditures. The capital projects fund decreased fund balance of about $5.5 million during the year. This will be replaced by future debt issuances as well as grant proceeds and potentially some contributions from the city's general fund. The general fund increased fund balance during the year from about $1.4 million to an ending balance of about $14 million. It's another strong year for the general fund within the city. No other funds had significant changes that I would point to you. Certainly, they're all prepared. The other governmental funds, in addition to the business type activities within the city's financial statements, are on the subsequent pages. The remainder of the financial statements are the notes of the financial statements. I typically try to discuss any major changes that have been implemented, such as accounting principles or accounting standards that have come out, so that if you were to read the financial statements one year over the other, I would point to any major changes that there have been. In previous years, we've had such items such as the pension statement, as well as the other post-employment benefit statement. But during 2021, there were nothing significant that I would point you folks to. These the notes of the financial statements read much like they do in previous years, and there's been no major modifications. Are there any questions on the financial statements themselves before I continue on to the other three reports that we've issued?
Folks? Questions? No question.
There being no question, I'm going to continue on to the single audit. So the city is a recipient of over $750,000 of federal funding during the year, which requires a federal single audit. This year, there was only one major program within that federal single audit, which is the Department of Transportation Airport Improvement Program. We audited that program and found there to be no findings, both in terms of the funds expended by the city, in addition to the internal controls implemented by the city over that federal funding. So again, the single audit is filed with the federal government by September 30th annually. And once again, the city's in compliance with that deadline with no findings to be reported to the federal government. The next report that we have is the State Department of Transportation audit. Annually, the New York State requires us to perform a Department of Transportation audit over the funds expended by the city. This report, again, yielded no findings, and there's nothing that I would bring to your attention within that report in terms of internal control deficiencies or other matters to make you aware of. Again, a clean report, as has been the case for the past numerous years at the city. No significant items to bring to your attention. The final document that we have is a required audit communications letter. This is addressed to you folks in your role overseeing the city. This document requires us to just formally communicate how the audit went, basically. Were there any significant issues, any difficulties, if there were any accounting policies implemented by the city that we're in disagreement with, any audit adjustments or uncorrected misstatements would be also disclosed within that document. But there is nothing within that document that I would bring your attention to. The city's accounting policies and basis for their estimates within the financial statements, we concluded to be reasonable, as are the internal controls of the city. Were no limitations by management during our audit. Management was fully cooperative and helpful during our audit, and there were no audit adjustments during our 2021 audit year end. With that, that concludes the four reportable items that we have. I am happy to take any questions that any folks have in relation to the city's audit.
Does the council have any questions? Jonathan, it appears that the council has no questions.
Mayor.
It doesn't appear that the council has any questions, Jonathan.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much for your time, and especially, I always like to conclude this by thanking the finance department for all of their hard work and the flexibility that they have in helping us receive all the required documentation. That's typically extensive documentation that we request. The cooperation of the city and the city's finance department is certainly very much appreciated. So thank you, folks.
Thank you very much, John.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thank you all, and have a great evening.
All right. With that, we will move to petitioners and public hearings. There is a public hearing on the ordinance to amend chapter 300-34 of the Code of the City of Oneonta entitled Fraternity, Sorority, and Membership Association Covenant. Is there anyone here to speak on that? And it appears that there is not, so we'll close that public hearing and we'll move on to the petitioners. Do we have anyone here who'd like to speak? Yes.
Hi, Joe Cumming, 8 Hudson Street. I just wanted to echo Jonathan's statements and congratulate Ginny and Greg on a clean audit. I'm sure Ginny would be the first to say that it's not done alone, which is true. I mean, there's a lot of work from the department heads, their designees, and our staff that go into getting an opinion like that. But I've also firsthand seen the effort that Ginny has put in, not just throughout the year to make those clean audit opinions happen, but also effort in preparing the financial statements, which is something that is, I think it's important to say that it's not commonly done. I think a lot of times, either companies or municipalities may outsource the actual financial statement preparation to their auditors. And I think the fact that Ginny is able to do that and do it so well and accurately, and it really is a tremendous amount of work. So I just wanted to also recognize those efforts as well in this process. Thank you.
And AJ, I see you here.
Yes. I had emailed you, Mayor, and as well as Carrie, as well as Greg Matisse, about the possibility of having an internship program here at the city government level. I was wondering if there would be a possibility of that happening. I talked to my political science advisor, who regrettably is the outgoing chair of the political science department at SUCO. He felt it was a great idea and he wanted me to bring it up to Common Council to see what the viewpoint is and what you guys had to say about the whole thing.
Well, I can say that we have in the mayor's office 2 interns from SUNY and 1 coming from Hardwick. So there's certainly an appreciation of the internship programs. We can talk about that further.
Okay.
Great. With that, we'll move on to boards and commission reports, and we'll go to our Commission on Community Relations and Human Rights. And we didn't, in fact, because we have a blank screen where Luke Murphy's face might be, that he'll join us around 7:30. We'll move on then to the Board of Public Service. You thought you were off the hook. Stop if you're not.
All right, so this goes all the way back to October 6th when we met. We had front of us was an unsafe building at 6 Grove Street, which was I'm trying to read my notes. Anybody ever sees my writing, it's about that big. So they did make it an unsafe building. They gave 90 days for the homeowner, which the homeowner was there working with the board to remove an upper part of the structure of the porch, because there's some structural issues there. The homeowner from listening in has been working with Steve and Codes and in this board to be able to come to a good conclusion on doing that. We also 40 Spruce Street, they approved to suspend the invoice in the billing. That was a house that was being sold, it was in transition, and they didn't feel it was to give it to the new homeowner to put it on the taxes. That was also a death of a past city employee as well. And the house was in transition, they moved down to Florida, and it was just lost in the shuffle who would own it. We talked about 189 Chestnut Street, that was declared as an unsafe building as well. They've asked for it to be they say boarded up, but made safe, securing the structure. and trying to get the roof done. And then 243 Chestnut Street was brought in front of us, which was a nuisance and unsafe building. They ordered that to be vacated immediately being 10 days. And then it's gonna be secured in 10 days, and then we're supposed to go back and make sure the stuff is working with it, secure and stuff in 30 days.
Thank you, Scott. Do we have any questions for Councilmember Harrington? Scott, what was the address of the last one again?
243 Chestnut Street.
Thank you. All right, thank you very much. And I don't know, do we have audio? Can you hear us? Councilmember Murphy.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Joined us, yes, and we are still in our boards and commission reports section of the agenda, and we're glad to see you. And if you can, report on the Commission on Community Relations and Human Rights.
Certainly. So the commission met last Thursday, I believe it was. It was a short meeting, but a lot was discussed. I was unable to attend, but I did reach out and asked for any additional business other than what was on the video, and nothing was. The commission is currently working on a combination postcard brochure, flyer, advertisement type thing that talks about the commission, as well as provides a template for the Trailblazer Award. The commission is currently looking at recommending a new commissioner to you, Mayor. They're still kind of going through a vetting process. So they don't have someone quite yet, but that will likely be coming down the pike, so to speak, relatively soon. There is continued work towards strengthening and continually building the connection with Job Corps, working on future outreach. And former Chief Doug Brenner is open to coming back and doing workshops with the commissions on things like Know Your Rights and similar things. And it was a short minute. I think it was about meeting about 25 minutes, but they did a pretty good job getting quite a few things.
Terrific. My favorite kind of meeting. Do we have any questions or comments for Councilmember Murphy? I see none. So thank you very much, Luke. Okay, moving on to our committee reports. We'll start with Finance and Human Resources Committee. Councilmember Carson.
We met October 24th. And the items that we had on our agenda, except for the transit coordinator appointment, has been moved forward to tonight's agenda. And so I'll try and answer any questions you might have consent agenda.
Any questions for Len on it?
Hearing none, Mayor, if you want, we can move into the Economic Development Committee.
You read my mind.
We met October 25th. And I believe we had a pretty good discussion on the three items on our topic. We did keep the properties that are deficient in property school taxes on our agenda as a topic. And we're hopeful that the next time we meet, we'll get to have our financial director meet with us and give her perspective and how maybe we can create a hybrid system to this so that we can bring something back to the council to look at. We talked more about the alleyway improvements. Alleyway West was given a OCI grant, and from that, the improvements will include cleaning, lighting, and some aesthetic improvements. And I think that's very exciting. I think it gives us opportunity to continue talking about Alleyway East, which is a much larger project, and we'll be working with our community developer and her staff on moving items forward with that. That is definitely a larger project and will take quite some time to get through. And then we talked about how do local developers enter into the process of being knowledgeable about grants. And Judy, I think, came up with an excellent idea of making small videos and having that on our website. So if somebody's interested in doing a certain project, she's going to start answering questions that could arise, those frequently asked questions for local developers to view the videos. So I think that was a great approach. That was her idea. And we look forward to seeing that project come through fruition. So that's what we did on October 25th.
That's terrific. Mark Davies.
Well, can you clarify east and west? Is that east and west delineation, is that Dietz or is it?
So we're on Dietz and I'm looking with Main Street to my back.
I know east and west, I'm good with that. I
So
don't know you're talking about.
I was doing, yeah, so just, I don't know how else to name them right now, and I'm sure the owners of those alleyways will come up with something, but just to start the conversation right now. That's the only way I could do it.
Yeah, so east is east of Dietz, that little section, and then west is everything else. And does that extend all the way down past, I mean, all the way down to
To
it all?
Community Bank, so if you're on the east one, you're gonna go from Dietz all the way down to Community Bank, that's quite a, that's a line. Whereas the other one, west. 4 buildings? 3 or 4 buildings?
So there's that area, but then there's the parking lot behind the old Brazilian building, and then there's another section over there.
So potentially,
West
you
and
could,
west.
That's right.
you could get all the way to Chestnut Street,
Gotcha.
and then that's one of the ideas is. Trying to get folks to go from the parking lot back into that alleyway, say anybody that's gonna be looking at the Chestnut Street Theater. As you all know, that there's some friends of the theater group that are very active and are trying to look at that. And revitalize that, so these are some of the ideas that we're just kind of processing through.
I can say, I can just add to that, on the other side, the west side, talking with Ed May the other day, and he's going to match the OCI lighting on the other side, so there'll be lighting on both sides. And I was in the room when he called the local paper to fill some of the chuck holes there, and so that'll be taken care of as well. And so it's the start of something great.
Yeah.
Right, and now, if I may just add, I did also speak with Ed May about that, so we can coordinate all the building owners getting the same kind of lighting, so it's
Right.
consistent throughout. And I did eventually get a hold of the man who owns the building in between the Historical Society and Windward Roots has. And he's also interested in either applying for the grant or, also doing the same kind of thing. So hopefully we can get that whole stretch lit up with some nice lighting. And then the hope is that it'll serve as an example for other building owners to kind of do the same thing.
Right. And then becomes a space that is inviting and
Mhm.
potentially used
And
for,
safer.
yeah.
Yeah.
Can be for different things.
But
Oh,
again,
yeah.
I do want to give credit to Emily and her idea on the alleyway, so I know it's probably taken longer than you wanted to. But welcome to go.
Not really. No, it's been good.
It's great. Any other questions or comments for Glenn on the economic development committee report? Okay, terrific, thank you. We'll move on to the city administrator's report.
Few brief updates on some recent issues. People marketing contractor was in house day. Working yesterday, working on crosswalks and stop bars. I think he's some work on Center Street. For by the YMCA. Very on the street. Focusing on the areas near the schools, Main Street, Chestnut Street, River Street. We'll continue working the rest of this week, possibly 3 days next week. Getting many of the, I think roughly 90 or so intersections done that DW had asked. So that's good. Streetlight maintenance contractor was also in town today. They'll be here at least a day a week over the next several weeks, working to address the various outstanding issues from the conversion project. There's been some complaints from committees that have been reported multiple times that say we had issues with the contractor that had done the installation, not being able to get back. This is a new contractor, we the maintenance contract, and DPW said they had a great meeting with them today. I'm feeling optimistic that these issues will get addressed. And then lastly, they had a question about traffic signals on Main Street at Walling Ave and 3rd Street. Those were going to flash a few weeks ago, I believe now, as a trial basis, just to see how that would work with those signals potentially not there or in that flash mode. So that trial ends on November 7th. We can gather some information, some feedback from residents and drivers. We'll evaluate that and measure the recommendation. Either keeping it the way it has been or making some measures.
Sorry, Rick, what's that intersection?
That's Aqua Main and Third and Main Long. It's things that work together. No, go ahead.
I was wondering about that.
Any, yes, Dave.
Greg, I know you and I have talked about this a little bit, the sidewalks on Upper Elm. And then the sections that are missing on Normal Avenue. I know that, I'm assuming that they are not coming this week to do the work, but since it's already November, what's the backup plan? And as I said before, the cones keep slowly disappearing around those missing sections. They're filled with leaves, and I think at the very least, if the crews can keep up and just pay attention every now and then and run through there and drop other cones. Especially as we get closer to the weekends. But what's the backup plan if they are not able to do that?
He doesn't fill that back in. Snow needs service water.
Let's hold
Full patch in the areas where the sidewalk. But I know John and Chris are talking about today, they're gonna reach back out to contractor. It needs to be done before next year, whether that's successful or not.
Other questions, comments? Perfect. We'll go to the mayor's remarks, and I just want to say first off, I don't know that there's another municipality in the state of New York that does Halloween as well as Oneonta does. It's been actually a wonderful several days, and yesterday was, I think, very, very nicely done. So I want to shout out to Destination Oneonta and to DPW and to SUNY Oneonta and to Harvard and all the folks that came downtown and enjoyed themselves. The retailers and the restaurants were, great participants. There's seemingly extra candy everywhere, but there were an awful lot of kids and their families enjoying Main Street yesterday, and the parade is my favorite parade that happens in the city. Oneonta, we never parade that folks on either side could just easily be in that parade for how entertaining they are. It's a good parade. So there's that. I also want to share with you this prepared piece. This is about the budget. So acknowledging the fact that the continuing escalation of costs in healthcare insurance and fuel, equipment purchase, maintenance, and staffing will require a choice to either cut services or to finance in the short term through our general fund. And that this is not a sustainable course. I want to inform the council of the following. At the May 2nd meeting of the Common Council, I will make a presentation that will be distillation of various strategies and a blueprint for the addition of $1.2 million in new yearly revenues. These new revenue streams will be determined through conversation and planning with the city administrator and finance director, as well as with the leadership of our anchor institutions, the county, and the state. Through the course of these next 6 months, regular reporting of our progress will be made to the Finance HR Committee, who will be involved as partners in the process, and of course, to all council members and the public who choose to attend or view the meetings as they'll be archived. It is my hope and expectation that through this effort, we'll find ourselves in a better place during budget discussions next year and into the future. And that will conclude May 2nd, 6 months from today. Work is cut out for us. Not necessarily. So with that, we'll move on to the consent agenda. And motion number 1, that the Common Council approve the minutes of the special meeting held October 25th, 2022. Motion number 2, that the Common Council approves the warrants totaling $168,167.28, and that the same be placed on the Director of Finance's desk for payment as presented. Motion number 3, that the Common Council approves the city administrator's appointment of Jillian Hungerford to the position of civilian dispatcher effective November 2nd, 2022, at a base annual salary of $32,402, CSEA grade 6. This appointment is subject to the satisfaction of all applicable civil service requirements. Motion number 4, that the common council authorizes the mayor to enter into an agreement with Permitium LLC of Pineville, North Carolina, for the provision of an online vital records request application at no cost to the city. This agreement is subject to review by the city attorney and will renew annually until canceled. Motion number 5, that the common council authorizes the mayor to execute a memorandum of agreement dated November 1, 2022 with the CSEA Local 1000 AFSCME AFL-CIO City of Oneonta Unit 8101 to extend a 4-day work week program for certain city staff and to shorten the advance notice requirement for scheduled changes in certain circumstances. Motion number 6, that the common council approves the budget transfers totaling $221,000 as presented for estimated fire overtime costs. And lastly, motion number 7, that the common council authorizes the director of finance to accept a gift in the amount of $500 from Marjorie Mercy to be restricted for the Wilbur Park Gate Improvement Project and further authorizes any necessary budget amendments for said acceptance. Which brings us to the end of the consent agenda. Are there any motions to be pulled? Yes. Katie.
6, please. 6.
6, thank you, I'm sorry.
Great.
And do we have any others to be pulled? Okay, so with that, do I have a motion to approve? I have a second and a roll vote.
Councilmember Murphy,
Aye.
Councilmember Davies,
Yes.
Councilmember Ritzberger,
Yes.
Councilmember Rodriguez, Councilmember Carson,
Yes.
Councilmember Henry,
Yes.
Councilmember Allen,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
Terrific. Now, motion number 6. It's yours. Do we have a motion to approve? Emily, followed by
Oh, second.
second by you. Very good. And it's all yours.
Yeah, so I just got a question regarding the memo with this. I just wanted to understand how the, like. Well, yeah, so we're moving from personal services, overtime training, personal services and health and dental insurance to the other 3 funds. Okay, so what is the impact of taking out almost $74,000 from health and dental insurance? Those seem like fixed costs, which is why I'm wondering like
It's
how that will work.
it's because we budgeted for vacancies that have not been filled,
Okay,
so those funds are available.
okay, excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further discussion?
Councilmember Murphy,
Aye.
Councilmember Davies,
Yes.
Councilmember Ritzberger,
Yes.
Councilmember Carson,
Aye.
Councilmember Carson,
Yes.
Councilmember Henry,
Yes.
Councilmember Allen,
Yes.
Councilmember Rogers.
That takes us to discussion item, motion number 8, that the common council adopts the following resolution, a resolution of the common council of the city of Oneonta, New York, whereas the city of Oneonta is submitting a request for a grant of funds to the NYSDOT pursuant to section 5311, title 49, United States Code for a project to provide public mass transportation service for operations in the amount of $405,000 for the 2022 fiscal year and $698,000 for the 2023 fiscal year, and has committed the local share, whereas the city of Oneonta and the state of New York have entered into continuing agreements or will enter into successor continuing agreements which authorizes the undertaking of the projects and reimbursement of the federal and applicable state shares. Now therefore, be it resolved that the mayor is authorized to act on behalf of the city of Oneonta to sign the application and progress and complete the above named projects. Do I have a motion to approve? Mark Davies, followed by Emily. And discussion? Do we have any discussion? All right, then we'll take the vote.
Councilmember Murphy,
Aye.
Councilmember Davies,
Yes.
Councilmember Ritzberger,
Yes.
Councilmember Carson,
Aye.
Councilmember Henry.
Yes.
Councilmember Henry,
Yes.
Yes.
Councilman Durant.
Yeah.
Councilman Durant. Aye.
Wonderful. At this point, we're gonna open up the floor to budget discussion, and we will turn over to you.
Mayor. Turn it over to Jenny in just a second. Just a quick recap, our focus of our discussion tonight will be the general fund. As you know, that's the fund that we were unable to balance in our initial presentation of the draft budget. Water and sewer fund, we were able to, through cuts from the initial requests, reach the budget for those for 2023. Rate tables with 10% revenue increases will be presented on November 15th along with presented budget. We're not proposing changes to the rate structure at this time. The enterprise fund will be teamed off the balance for 2023 using the CARES Act funding to have. Jenny has, I think, reported last time that we anticipate use of CARES Act funding in the next 2 years before that's exhausted. General fund deficit began around $76 million. We've now got that down to around 1.12 million. We don't recommend any additional cuts to that in order to maintain current level of service. To make any additional cuts would incur service reductions of some sort that we're not recommending. Options to resolve that issue. Obviously, we can use the unrestricted fund balance that we have in the general fund. We have ARPA second round funding that we have not yet committed to anything. That's on our discussion list tonight. I think it's an item. And of course, the council who initially this summer had directed us to assume going to the tax cap, you could vote to exceed the tax cap to raise additional general fund project priority. Our recommendation ultimately at this point is to use the balance to cover that balance with the unrestricted fund balance. Yeah, with that quick summary, I'm gonna ask you to go through some slides, talking about the 5-year forecast. Like we use the contact.
Thank you, Greg. In front of you and also on the TVs for the presentation of the slides, what I've done is taken our general fund revenues and expenditures, and I've projected them out through 2028. And so for the first slide, we'll be looking at the revenues. For the real property tax, what I did between that and the pilots is I estimated a 2% increase going through 2028. Sales tax, I was conservative and did a 3% increase for an estimate. And the fire contract with the town, I applied a 1% increase. Ambulance revenues, I applied a 1% increase. State aid, I applied a 0% increase because I do not know if the state plans to raise the aim or not. We've had the same amount, we've talked about this before, since 2011. And for the other revenues, it was at various percentages. It would depend on the different area as far as what percentage I applied. So you will see that from the 2003 tentative to the 2028, the annual increase of revenues ranges from about 290,000 up to 312,000. Over that 5-year period, it raises revenues by almost $1.5 million. And the graph will illustrate to you the different growth factors between basically the 5 major areas being real property tax, sales tax, fire contract, ambulance revenues, and state aid. Any questions on how I arrived at those numbers? Or yes.
So with regards to the fire contract, when is that due?
The fire contract, the contract expires the end of 2023. And Greg and I have been talking the past couple of weeks about meeting with the town to start negotiations.
So the number that we're seeing for the 23, that's on it.
That's already determined.
Correct. And then it was 1% after that. So,
Yes.
okay. And then you said you used 3% for sales tax?
Yes.
Thank you.
So Jay, I'm just curious how you arrived at the percentage. Is that kind of like historically looking back? At
Yes,
that
yes.
level is kind of
Yeah.
taking that average across that?
Yeah, I would look back at history, and I would also look at any type of change of activities. For example, we had the past, I want to say past last year and this year, we had a great increase in sales tax, but I still don't feel that those numbers are stable. So I did not want to overestimate. And so I went back and I did basically, I would look at a 10-year average, I would look at a 7-year, 5-year, and I would just look at the different analysis to figure out what I thought would be a good estimate. You never want to overestimate your revenues, because when you do, then you're bound to end up with a deficit in your revenues. And so you always want to be conservative in those areas.
Thank you. But that kind of leads me into my last question. On other revenues, you show a decrease of approximately 150,000 between those years trending. Could you just tell us why you're decreasing that?
Sometimes it will depend on the area. So let me just look at the detail plan and I can tell you what area it was in. Oh, it was interfund transfers. I'm sorry, it was interfund transfers, and that was because of excess bond proceeds. We will not have those in the anticipated numbers going forward. You're welcome.
Any other questions? It's fine.
The next slide is for the expenditures. And what we did is we broke this out between personal services, fringe benefits, operations, debt service, and transfers to other funds, basically to capital project funds. You will see that on the personal services, depending on the area, for public safety, I estimated 3% on all other departments. I estimated a 2% increase. The reason being is because new hires go through steps, and sometimes those steps have a greater salary adjustment. And so you will see that the personal services go from 7 million up to 8 million over the 5-year period. Fringe benefits was a combination of percentages. Health insurance, I did a 10% increase. I do not know if that will be realistic. The reason why I would do a 5%, but because we're getting an estimated 25% this year, I thought that I should increase it to a 10% number. Operations, I did basically a 2% on most of the categories. And debt service is actual, but going out into 2026, you'll see that it jumps up quite a bit. I anticipated another debt issuance for different street projects by then, and so I added 300,000 to the debt service. And also, I just want to back up on the operations for a minute. Greg has mentioned to you that for us to maintain our equipment, the general fund really should be spending approximately $1 million a year for different replacements or upgrades into our equipment. So what I did is I started out at a 500,000 figure and slowly worked it up to $1 million by 2028. And then for the transfers right now, because our budget is so tight and we have been depending on our CHIPS funding to have our local match for our street projects, we don't have any transfers to capital projects in the 22 or the 23 budget. So what we did in 24 is we added 300,000 and increased it, and kept it 300,000 to 2028. We would like to make that an annual allocation, so it's expected. And we would also like to end up doing that also in the water and sewer funds as time goes on. So you will see that between the 2023 tentative and the projected 2028, the annual increases in expenditures range from 810,000 up to almost $1 million, or even 2026, it's 1.1 million. Which is quite a difference between what the revenues are projected to increase versus what the expenditures are. And what I'd like to point out on the graph is the personal services, which on your paper is blue, on the screen it's orange, and you will see how they increase. But please pay attention to the orange line, which is fringe benefits. And you will see that by 2028, our fringe benefit number is almost the same as our salary number. Obviously, that is not sustainable. So we're going to have to look at our health insurance costs. Then the next slide is more of a summary of the anticipated revenue changes to the expenditure changes. And you will see that the orange graph, the orange line is our increase in expenditures, and the blue line is our increase in our revenues. So it's that gap that we need to concentrate on. And when you take the estimated revenues and the estimated expenditures, we have to apply that to our fund balance. Now, I know we've got a discussion, we've had discussions before of how much fund balance we should have on hand, how much we should restrict, how much we should unrestrict. And what I would like to do in this presentation is to show you how important our strong fund balance is to the city. And our fund balance policy is that we have 35% of our annual expenditure budget to be reserved or to be unassigned for anticipation of unexpected expenditures or difficult situations that we need to get through. So if you look at this grid, the bottom section, which on the screen is orange, on your paper is blue, that shows the estimated deficits that we are anticipating through these projections. The red line on the screen, orange line on your paper, we start out with almost a $14 million fund balance. And as the years progress, we end up with a deficit of almost 2.6 million in our fund balance, if nothing gets changed between now and 2028. The purple line in the center is our 35% target to keep our unassigned fund balance. So you will see that by the time 2025 hits, those lines cross, which means we've exhausted our fund balance to our actual minimum of 35%. So we don't want to get there. We want to make sure that our fund balance stays strong, and we want to make sure that we don't continue to use our fund balance to balance our budget. So Greg and I have discussed in detail a deficit reduction plan that we would like to just present to you. We talked about this last year when we were talking about the 2022 budget. But as you know, we're currently in discussions with Fox Hospital for an ambulance transfer contract. We've also discussed implementing downtown paid parking. And as I said to you in the fringe benefit discussion, our health insurance has to be looked at to see what different options there are. Could it be a change in plan? Could it be a consortium with the county? Could it, we just have several options that we need to look at. And obviously these will all have to be negotiated with the unions. Lift assistance ambulance fee, this won't bring in much money, but one thing that the fire chief and I and Mohammed have talked about is that the ambulance gets called quite often for when somebody has like a life alert. And chief, please correct me if I say something incorrectly. A life alert alarm, and the ambulance will be called to the house to help the person get up from the floor, or if they've got something that is not billable for the ambulance as far as a transport. So it's called a lift assistance charge, and it ranges from what Multimed has told us between $50 and $350. The average collection on those is $38, but we thought that because the fire department is experiencing about 500 of those calls a year, that we thought it would be worth the council considering implementing a $50 to $100 fee for these lift assistance charges. The next thing that we would like to look at is when the fire department becomes fully staffed, how it will reduce the overtime costs and what savings we will realize from that. The stormwater usage fee, user fee, Greg and I have been in contact with NICOM as far as looking at the possibilities of implementing this for the city of Oneonta. The AIM increase, we've talked about how the state has not adjusted our state revenue sharing since 2011. The mayor has been in close contact with people in Albany, with all of the municipalities trying to convince the state. We don't know if this is going to come, but it's something that we want to keep pursuing. And again, I've been communicating with NICOM directly with the contacts, and she knows to keep me up to date if there's any progress. And then we also have talked before about the tax levy increasing over the cap. Those right now are immediate ideas that we are pursuing, and obviously we will continue to pursue different ideas. These will take time. It's not something that's going to instantly happen, but we want to make sure that you know that we are pursuing different ways to approach closing the deficit gap. But I also want to point out that our current, the current request for the 2023 budget resulted in a $6 million deficit. Take the fire truck out of there, and that brings it down to a 4.5 million. We cut it more than 3.5, we cut it down 3.3 million to get it down to the 1.1. So what I'm trying to say to you is that not only do we need to increase our revenue sources, but we also need to figure out how we're going to fund the expenses that have already been cut, plus what our future expenses are going to be presenting to us. So we have to look at operations, we have to look at expense reductions. For example, this is small, but we're looking at our telephone system. How can we change the telephone system to bring that cost down? All of those little things add up, but they do take some time. So this is part of the, this is also giving you a 5-year forecast. It's a mandatory requirement for the council to have this information. So are there any questions?
You and the fire chief talked about billing out for the rescue, and that goes to motor vehicle crashes. Is that still a billable item?
That I'm not informed on.
So we can occasionally bill insurance for materials used like ED drive and stuff like that.
Okay, that I'm not informed on, so I can't answer your question at this time, but we can investigate it.
If you're as granular as the lifting fee after you might start looking at the rescue going out.
Yeah, sticking with the fire department, we can elaborate a little bit on the strategy for staffing to eliminate overtime or at least decrease it.
Well, for right now, what we're looking at, the current budget has the current budget proposal. Well, even in 2022, but also in 2023, we have budgeted for 7 firefighter crews. And if we get the Fox Hospital contract, and also hopefully if we get the SAFER grant, if we increase that to 8 man crews, or I should say 8 firefighter crews, then that will allow the chief to have enough coverage on one shift where he won't have to be calling in for coverage when there's someone out.
Gotcha.
So depending on how the crews are structured will depend on how much callback time he will have to do, and also scheduling for their contractual leave time.
Okay, so that's contingent on the Fox Hospital.
Well, it's contingent on a number of things. Will we be able to build a part-time staff? So there's different strategies that we can use in the approach. But that is a goal, not only for the cost to the city, but also for the relief of the current firefighters and the number of hours that they're working.
Right. Yeah, which is really concerning. One thing that had been mentioned to me is changing the structure of the responses to EMS, sending out like for I don't remember what the terminology is, and maybe the experts on that side of the table can help me, but calls that are less serious, having 2 people on the ambulance rather than 3. And I just wondered if that had been discussed at all, or what your thoughts are on that. Cause I think that ends up leaving someone else in the station if there's like a fire call. So I just wondered what your thoughts are.
So.
I like very little about this is back I didn't care for.
So I've talked about this before quite a bit, actually, when we're kind of an anomaly here in city of Oneonta.
Okay.
So any like commercial service that is around us, they send 2 people on an ambulance,
Uh-huh.
but they also have the volunteer people within those departments to come and assist with the lifting portion and everything. We don't have any of that built into the area. So like, we don't have a volunteer staff to come and assist. So we've got to go up long flights of stairs and stuff to get these patients and then be able to bring them down to the ambulance.
Okay.
And to operate the stretcher, that's 2 people alone. So we would theoretically have to abandon a patient to bring a stretcher and get a stretcher into a person, or potentially it would take a lot longer time if we brought the stretcher in with all of our stuff to get it to that individual. So to make us the most efficient and most effective and get us back in service in the quickest amount of time, that 3-person crew is just the most efficient way.
Okay. Thank you.
So I don't have a question as much as a comment, and perhaps Greg, this is aimed at you and Joe as well. I mean, it seems that I spent this weekend looking through this, and frankly, it was, you know, I can't imagine you all looking at this every single day. It's really difficult to look at, recognizing the costs that we have. And the health insurance is what I kind of keyed in on is, Jenny, we noted in the graphs in terms of some of the expenses that keeps on growing. So I was really kind of trying to dig on that and began to kind of stumble across proactive approaches to healthcare. So I'm putting this out there as something I think we need to begin to investigate. It's not going to fix it right now. But I think we need to look at some long-term kind of proactive approaches with kind of employee health programs and plans. I was able to find a report. CDC did an examination of 56 different studies, and the conclusion was, based on all that evidence, that employee health plans can lower healthcare costs by 25%. Because of, you know, just by different kind of incentivized programs. So to me, I think I don't want to look at, let's look at reducing what we have, but can we kind of tighten down our approach to our employees, perhaps our retirees as well, and have some proactive approaches to work with folks around some of the high, the items that most impact people, blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart disease types of issues is probably the #1 thing that's probably jacks up a lot of different things. We have programs that address that. Other things that we might know that are commonalities. I guess I would like to see us try to begin to actively work towards that, and whatever that might look like, but I just feel like that's the low-hanging fruit that we can begin to address. It doesn't address it right now, but maybe it begins to address it 5 years from now, and I think that's when we need to have the biggest impact.
Just to follow up on that, Mark, our current health carrier, Excellence, does have a lot of telehealth care for the employees, and they do have different health programs. And we, our brokers will send out information to all of our employees to update them on their options. We have been encouraging them to participate. We've had different growths in different areas, just not as much as we would like. And so that is something that we're pursuing. Also, our health brokers are investigating different options for us to see what's out there. Greg and I will be meeting with the county to discuss developing a consortium to see if that's actually an option. So we are exploring many different options, but obviously it all needs to get negotiated with the unions before anything can get approved. You know, when you've heard me talk about how I don't like percentage raises. I don't like to apply percentages to numbers because it just depends on the math as far as what the result comes up with. That's why I like to look at dollars. So when you take a percentage, if you take 25% and apply it to a $3 million bill, that's huge. You know, so it's when they say 25%, I want to know 25% of what number. So when you take that to our health insurance bill, as I said to you before, that was like over almost $500,000 just for the general fund. So so when we look at those, and I said, I think I said to you before, if we realize the 15% decrease this year instead of a 15% increase that we have in the budget, it would be almost $800,000 difference. So the health insurance costs are huge right now, and I just see them growing. Also, in the audited financials, Jonathan talked about the OPEB. Right now, our OPEB liability, which is our other post-employment benefits, which is our retiree bill, right now that estimate is $45 million. I think it's 45 or 48. I'd have to refresh my number, but that's huge. And what they do is they take our current retirees and our actives, and they do an estimate for how long they think they're going to live and what the rates are going to do, and you know what that's going to end up costing the city over the long term. So the number's huge, and it's really something that we do have to look at.
Great, Lynn.
Can I just?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
My apologies, Len. I just wanted to thank you for the consortium. One of the other things I was wondering if we've explored consortiums and what there might be some
Well,
things. I'm happy to look into that.
Katie was looking into that pre-COVID. Katie and Greg were looking into that pre-COVID, but then COVID happened and everything kind of just stopped. And then also the county administrator has changed. But from what I understand, the new county administrator is very familiar with this.
Great, thank you.
So Mark will be no lag on the county, and as Jimmy was just saying with regards to the health consortium, because I was participating in that in 2019 and 2020. So the city and the county are definitely in sync on the healthcare consortium. It's just a matter of time. There's just so many moving parts on that. We have to do that. If you need to actively be engaged, it still take probably 2 to 3 years to get it up and running. Then it takes another 2 to 3 to start seeing that leveling off. So to your thought process, it's definitely a 5 or 6 year for March before any of that could come into fruition.
But just to clarify what you just said, so there is interest.
Oh, there's interest in Blue Pack County, even as a legislator. We've gone as far as we have a contractor in place that will take us through that process. So it's moving forward. It's just as Jay said, previous folks that were sitting chairs moved around, and so it's kind of lagged it off.
Even in the state, there's this understanding of the need for this for municipalities. And that in speaking with our senator, he's certainly supportive of, well, so there's a lot of push to make this happen. It's just unfortunate.
It would happen even quicker if we could join into the under education consortiums. Our local schools already have this in place, but there's legislation that prohibits the municipalities from getting into that consortium. So, yeah, it's frustrating.
Well, I'm sorry, can I add to that? And from what I understand, the prohibit, it's because of our public safety. They don't want to put law enforcement and firefighters in the same group as they do teachers. That is what I was told.
What's the thinking? Have you had any of this?
I think it's because of the nature of the job. And that's what I've been told. Glenn, I don't know if that's what you are.
Never out of all names, but that one, we just told that it's legislation that wouldn't allow us to switch over, because there's some very large educational consortiums that we could pop into, but we're not allowed to. So,
No, unless the state changes the law.
but I'm definitely putting your name up to be the liaison for the healthcare and the consortium.
Right.
And I did talk with Alan Ruffles last week, who's the treasurer about Cedar County, and he's very much interested in, Greg and I are going to meet with them next week or the week after.
And if I could, one more thing, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
No.
This is the topic. I think this is if we can address that, we address a lot, right? So my apologies, Mayor, to suggest to you anything about your position, but I think this is one of those places where you can use your influence at the state level. This needs to be a statewide conversation. Why we as municipalities are bearing the brunt of this. This is problematic. So again, my apologies for telling your job. I think
we are very much on the same page in the conversations that they alluded to, representing the senator. Those conversations are already happening. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And it has a bigger impact on the smaller municipalities.
Absolutely.
They're seeing 25 to 30% difference in their healthcare costs per years. They actually have no idea what's going to happen until just a few weeks before they make their budget. It's very frustrating to be a small community.
Right, and nor is that something that frankly, my opinion, we want to be getting cutting on, because as we talked about, that's one of those kind of fringe benefit incentives that gets good employees here. You start cutting back on that, we have a negative impact on our city that's even worse over 5 years. So I think we need to really figure out some proactive and positive ways to address that. I apologize, shut up, but I was really burned up about this. It's nothing that we've done, but just how this is affecting us.
Okay, cool, this discussion, 4 years ago, we could have saved $2 million a year in Otsego County healthcare costs. 4 years ago, we could save that.
Let's not say that 4 years from now.
Lynn, did you have a
Mark,
question?
we also checked in, we get on to another county that had it, but there's also rules that are about jumping over counties to get to other counties. Because we actually tried that too. You guys see what with us here, well, it's
Tough to be handcuffed in that way, right?
yeah, they're in the state, you really need handcuffs, and that's half the issues. How do we do the handcuffs? Well, Albany's gotta change the handcuff policy.
For the very least.
So my question would be the projections, the analytics, and the potential revenue sources. Have you put anything down on paper, and if you had, it'd be great if you could share with us.
I did print out the detail tonight because I just thought it was too much paper, so I will be sending it to you via email.
Okay.
And just so you know, also in that, I go back, I think, to 2014 to show you the actuals. And then I bring you up to date, and then the projections that you guys are coming.
It would just be interesting since 2025 is really our critical mass year. You can see what you're projecting out for your new revenue.
Greg, you might be able to answer this if you can, that's fine. How many of these things that we have cut from this budget have we been just kicking down the road for the last few years?
Can't say specifically, but definitely there are things, especially in the equipment that, you know, we're going to talk about. Pushing things off, like Jenny mentions, you know, our analysis of our fleet. Being that we need to spend $1 million per year on average out of the general fund in order to maintain our fleet. You know, that hasn't really happened. We spent quite a bit of the general fund in the last decade, but it still hasn't averaged quite that much. I think we had 250,000 roughly in the budget this year in the general fund for equipment. So we're just not there at this time. So one area, transfers to capital projects, that's general fund and budget money being spent on street projects essentially, or other facility projects, whatever. We haven't spent anything the last 2 years. Able to spend anything. All of our street work is being done through state funding. Fortunate, Jenny's mentioned before, we received the additional $740,000 the last 2 years through the state program that hadn't existed previously. I have no idea how long that might last. I don't expect it will last forever. But I don't know. That's up to the state. It's sort of something more represented, but those are things that, as you know, in the broader discussions with Chris Iacobucci and all the service discussions, we're not doing much stormwater. Our roads are in pretty shape. That was the council's feeling, but there are lots of things that we're just not able to do. That eventually will.
So now that we've gone to the budget where we're at, I want to ask the question again. Is this the year that we should go over the tax cap?
Yes, we.
I'm just a general, yeah, it's just a general, it doesn't even need to have an answer, but I'm just thinking like everything that we've done. And if we're trying to get to that 5-year mark, where next year you start at a higher base rate. For your taxes on top, it's a compounding thing. Is this the year that we really need to look at going over that tax cap, because I don't know how much more we can push things down the road before. We start getting into some serious trouble.
So Jenny, knowing that the tax cap says at 2%, you can tell us what 2% would get us, and we can extrapolate from that what an additional percent would do. Obviously, to Scott's point, we're talking about compounding year after year. So coming in at a lower number now has an effect on the future, because those numbers aren't compounding. However, it's still money to be asked of our citizenry. So what does 2% give us, and we can kind of extrapolate from that?
Well, the hitting the tax cap for 2023, we were able to raise a little over $116,000 in taxes. Now, what's going to affect our taxes next year is the pilot agreement is going to kick in for the lofts on Deep Street. And so that will go towards our tax cap. And so what I would, my suggestion, and this is just my own personal suggestion, due to the current rate of inflation, we're going to be increasing the water and sewer by 10%. We're going to increase the minimum by $10 and then the tables by 10%. Then we're also going to be going to the tax cap. And considering the rate of inflation, I think going over the tax cap for 2023 should be postponed until the 2024 budget, only to let the economy settle. But that's my recommendation, only because I know how it's going to affect the homeowner with everything else that's being increased. Now, if it was a normal year with you know, gas prices being at their normal level, inflation being at the normal growth, because inflation, I've got a history of the inflation numbers. For the past number of years, I think the average has been like 1.94%. So this is an anomaly, and it will resettle. It just has to have time. And I've read it and listened to a lot of economic reports on it. It's due to the COVID, it's due to the shortage of supplies because of the pandemic and the shutdowns, and a lot of it's due to the war in Ukraine. It's a global thing. We've got an 8% rate cost of living increase here in the United States. Other countries have an 83% cost of living raise. So it's global. It's not just the United States. It's just not the Northeast. So because all of these different things have globally affected so many of different things in the market. And for example, the chips for the cars and, you know, all of those different things. So it's not an easy explanation, but that's from what I've read. That's how I sum it up quickly. But that would be my recommendation, is to go to the tax cap this year, then reconsider it for next year, only because of how it will affect the homeowners.
Any other discussion on this? Any other thoughts that you want to bring to discussion? Yes, Ellen.
First of all, I just want to say thank you again so much for putting all of this documentation together. I know it really took a really long time. It's very detailed. Thank you. One thing I wanted to maybe bring up as far as part of our deficit reduction strategies. Years ago, there was proposed or implemented a student public safety fee that would be paid by every student. It could be, you know, even a nominal amount, $50 to $100. It could generate a lot of revenue.
That's unconstitutional. It's illegal. Can't do that. You can't single out a certain portion of the population tax.
I don't, well, it was, I think it has to be supported by the state in order to go through. It's something that we have.
The grants from the state to compensate us, a pilot program with the other SUNY campuses, where dollar amounts were allocated to the city of Oneonta and Cortland and other cities that had students to compensate us, because all the city facilities, excuse me, the state facilities are non-taxable. But the students have an impact on us, but we have no authority to do that. We could talk to our legislators and ask them to see if they can get it happen, but we can't tax any particular portion of the population. And
Thank you. I do realize that, but I was wondering if it's something that perhaps we could advocate for on a state level.
Just, you know, I did follow up with NICOM yesterday on that exact question. And it was confirmed that any type of student fee for a public safety to be shared with the city needs to be instituted by SUNY itself. SUNY would collect the money, and then SUNY would share it with the municipalities.
Right.
So, and it has to be done at the state level, and it's not something that we can individually negotiate with the college. It has to go through SUNY itself.
Okay.
So that would be something that, again, the mayor could investigate at the the Conference of Mayors. And I also did confirm with NACOM that they don't know of any SUNY campus in the state of New York that is implementing any type of public safety fee.
Thank you, yeah, I mean, I could see it not only helping Oneonta, but municipalities across the state taking it. So,
Right.
I don't know if there's any, maybe, so I just thought I would.
Right. And my opinion, where that should happen is at the state level in our AIM formula. They, when they restructure the formula, if they ever do restructure the formula, if they could take into consideration for municipalities that do host SUNY settings, then we could get some extra aid from there. On the counter of that, and I don't know if it was this council or the prior council, I had written an email to the councils in encountering a report that was presented. I think it was this council. I asked for the economic impact of having the colleges here in Oneonta. And when you counter all of the COVID, if COVID proved anything, it proved how important the colleges are to the Oneonta's existence and the revenue funds or the revenue sources for every fund. Because when the college students are not here, we saw our revenues plummet. So there's a balance.
And you've always pointed out the water and sewer funds, the water and sewer fees that the institutions pay, is certainly something that benefits us. They're not free riders.
Right. So,
And I'm sorry, I'm not implying that at all. I'm just.
There's a comment that was made.
Okay.
Just to clarify what she said earlier, that this stuff.
so it's,
Okay.
yeah, but it is something to pursue. And I think the mayor is very well aware.
Okay. Thank you.
So piggyback off of what Emily's saying, and you were talking to NICOM. Are they saying it would have to be SUNY-wide, or that each individual SUNY could make that individual decision?
No, the individual colleges cannot do it. The SUNY institution itself has.
Suggest everybody play a couple hours of the Powerball and give something back to the city to win.
I don't understand.
Don't laugh, Mark, I've been doing that.
Mark, you get the taxes from a house. Themselves.
Further discussion on the subject? Our next section.
Well, the next step in the process is November 15th, that council will be bringing the tentative budget. If there are any changes that you like us to make between now and then, we can do that. If you'd like us to show, balance in the general fund using unrestricted fund balance.
I thought that was kind of our homework for this meeting, wasn't it? To give you a thumbs up for the shortfall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we're ready to agree on that, then we'll go forward and finalize the budget and put the full package here.
I mean, I don't really see much. Where are you gonna cut? What we're gonna do with it? I mean, the only other place we got is not a really good alternative.
Yeah, unrestricted fund balance, raise the tax cap above the tax cap, use ARPA funds, which else to cut to which one.
And I kind of like, I know ARPA is supposed to be a separate discussion, but I kind of like ARPA. As to get the projects done, we wouldn't normally be able to do something and try to keep that out. Taking money from there to put it to trying to balance this budget, if that just made any sense.
So we can look at this on the 15th, or we can.
Yeah, we can. Slow down the process, then.
I guess, let me clarify, we'd like to have direction now, and so that we can prepare the tentative budget for the 15th.
Kind of like Scott, I mean, I spent the weekend looking through this, and I also want to echo everyone's thanks to everyone for preparing this. It was very thorough and offered a lot of. All down the fact that I just wasn't anything that was really glaringly going to get us the reduction of 1.2 without impacting things. we could pick away at this or that, but ultimately this or that is linked to a whole bunch of services. We are where we are at this point, and I think we do need to have some long-term planning, which is why I was trying to talk about it. Health insurance is one of the pieces we need to plan on, but I think we need to take the hit this year.
So is it safe to say that we have a consensus that will allow you to prepare this public budget for 15? Yeah. That's that. All right, then we'll close this discussion and move on to ARPA. And Greg, I guess I'm gonna ask you to kick off the ARPA.
Okay, I put an email in these back in response to a question this issue about what's the expense so far, I can recap that, what our balances, so we've spent on the Eagle Park Electric infrastructure improvements. These two projects, we spent $83,000. The Eagle Park Mill is paid halfway to the project, we spent just about $197,000. Out of our budget, we also had $50,000 that was donated by FOF and $70,000 free reserve. Projects are complete. Of the remaining round 1, 2021 ARPA allotment, we had earmarked $235,000 for the Demo Park County Page, $50,000 for the Road Trail bridge replacement. With no that estimate is now $15,000 now that we actually done the conceptual design and got some construction estimates. We had noted 60,000 for the UL Park Festival for Clinton, 40,000 for UL Park Skate Park rehabilitation. Recent conversation with the council or committee meeting was that we would look to do some initial within our operating budget. Not using ARPA funds, we'll try to, I think we have $5,000, but actually we do some minor repairs, whatever we might need. It help us identify and maybe go get how do we plan for a bigger project in the future to really get nice sort of.
And I have identified someone, and he's looking at, I went out and filmed everything, if you can give me a response back to, but I should hopefully be able to hear from that in next week.
Thanks for doing it.
And then we had about $13,000 that was kind of hanging out there for New Park Meeting Drive sidewalk improvements. So originally, when we first discussed ARPA, that was shown as $175,000. We've adjusted everything significantly opposite to pay for actual costs of the projects we've completed so far.
No sidewalks for.
I'm sorry, New Park Main Drive, so there's change orders in that, it comes up Park Street, it turns into Sloan Drive, and it turns into place. So basically along the pond, where there's no sidewalk now, all the way back to former gas apps.
Yeah, I've been getting a lot of people that walk park asking to get sidewalks in there.
So Greg, that's the first tranche.
I'm sorry, before you move on, could you just tell us what the total amount was again? 700.
So not yet, 713,577
Okay, thank you.
is. Each tranche is that much.
Okay.
And the second we allocated to,
Nothing yet.
nothing yet,
We
but
discussed
generally speaking,
generally possibly anything that goes from capital projects. We talked about River Street water main replacement projects. Which is scheduled for next year, potentially. But we never really had a detailed discussion about that.
Yeah, and then we also have the $50,000 from the county.
Right, and that's when we do this Clover Park improvements, there's replacing or researching basketball court, every level, adding new roofs. Lighting's already there. Hopefully we'll be able to spend about $10,000 on improvements of playground, the accessible equipment. Maybe the shade structures, and then also reconfiguring the family play space in the lower part, wherever that might entail. To determine exactly, but kind of all or
there's some research being done that I'll do it.
sure.
Can I just make a comment on that? Okay, thanks. I wrote something out, so I guess you'll go with me. So I didn't really want to die on this hill, but, this has just been feeling really, you know, I have a toddler, so icky to me. And I wanted to, you know, dig into that a little bit and try to figure out why exactly. I think this is the kind of thing that before I was on council, I would read about and have some feelings about and kind of go like, someday I'm gonna run for council, man. And so since I'm here and I'm at the table, I feel like I should just take a second and say my piece about it. So obviously we received like a lot of communication about this after the decision was made at a council meeting within, you know, 15 minutes to take down the news that's since been rescinded. I've heard a lot from people who are not my constituents and a lot of people who are my constituents. And I appreciate that folks reached out to me because it helped me to hear different perspectives and to develop my perspective on it. I think that overwhelming response, and it kind of reaffirmed the way that I feel, is ultimately is empathy toward the neighbors of this facility. In the fourth ward, we absolutely can empathize with the status of your backyard changing like overnight, depending on who buys the house next to you. In fact, I've had people say to me, I feel like, you know, if my neighbor moves, I'm gonna have to buy the house next to me so I can control what's going on over there. So we can definitely empathize with that. And you know, when something like that happens in our neighborhood, the line that gets repeated to people in Center City is like, go over and introduce yourself, make friends, tell them that you have, you know, a 3-year-old or that you have to get to work in the morning. Which is not a bad idea, or to call the police. Those are the options. You know, and just like kids playing basketball, the basketball court, students who are at house party are just doing what they do in college, you know. So I think that argument is also fairly reasonable. I certainly don't blame the Medinas or anyone on the street who truly felt put out enough by this decision that they signed a petition. Because they organized, they participated in the system, they did exactly what we want people to do when they experience a problem with something that has happened to them, the city government. I also don't, you know, have any hard feelings for the decision that council made. I think that, you know, someone came in front of us, presented a pretty, you know, what felt like a compelling argument in the moment. They presented a problem, and it's human nature to want to fix that. I think that one thing that hasn't really been addressed is that the Parks and Rec Commission also did what it was supposed to do. They took an underutilized facility and made it vital again. The court went through all of the appropriate processes and steps. It was approved by 2 separate commission memberships and council memberships. Parks has heard and deliberated over this for over 2 years. I know that they have given it thought and that all sides of the argument have been presented. You guys should know that we have a Union Street resident come as a petitioner to a Parks meeting who was for the court, and also a current Union Street resident sits on the Parks and Rec Commission. They have since made the recommendation to keep the court where it is, and I see no reason to publicly undermine that decision. I think we need to remember that we represent everyone who lives in the city, not just a vocal handful of individuals. It's a public park with public facilities. Basketball is an appropriate use in the park, and clearly there's a decent portion of our constituency that wants it there. This facility is close to a neighborhood, and that means that we have to work a little bit harder to make sure that the park is a good neighbor. I think that Parks and Rec and then CLIC and Legislative Committee should absolutely review the noise ordinance in effect and the parks curfew to make sure that they're meeting the ongoing needs of the community. I think it's perfectly appropriate for signs to be posted as they have that indicate that there are little ears listening and spelling out the applicable ordinances and defining a decibel level that is too loud for music if we allow music at all. These have been done in other cities to help walkable neighborhoods coexist. We could continue to explore a visual or sound barrier. I also had the suggestion from a few really well-respected and you know, credentialed members of the community that we could host a community conversation at the court and actually bring people together and facilitate healthy relationships. And I think that's it for me. The reason why this isn't sitting right is because it's kind of an anti-neighborhood decision. neighborhoods are about learning to live together, appreciating one another and respecting each other. And this is an opportunity for us to create community instead of pushing us farther apart, literally. And then we can use that $50,000 on the items that we identified here tonight that benefit the entire community while we wait for the master plan to come forward from Parks and Rec, which is forthcoming and is part of the established process. So I just appreciate you giving me the floor for a few minutes, and I hope you'll consider my comments. Thank you.
Additional discussion?
Yeah, oh, I have something. Yeah, I think, we're talking about projects that benefit the entire community. One thing that is not on this list, because it's not really a park thing, it's kind of a park thing, but it's not really a park thing. But I think there's been some consensus that we'd like to expand our community gardens. And so I wanted to just throw that on the table, like a lead balloon, and say, what do we think about maybe rethinking the items that are on here? I'm curious if anybody had any other thoughts about these projects and in terms of, where they fall on the priority list, and I want to see what people thought about maybe using this as an opportunity to expand those.
But first off, I just want to say thank you for taking that much time and effort into what you prepared for us to listen to. But I also want the general public to understand that that night that this council made a decision wasn't the first time we had heard that. In fact, if I remember correctly, I believe Councilmember Davies brought it up 2 or 3 other times, either in council or in committees or the combination thereof. I know that I'm sure like everybody here has had that answered to constituents or just folks in general about that. And you bring up a good point of maybe suggesting having a neighborhood meeting and trying to get all the parties there at the table. But at the end of the day, you're right. There's not only little people's ears that are listening to the words that were being said on the court, but it's also adults. And you're right, the neighborhood should maybe adjust a little bit, but also the folks that are using those facilities should adjust. And I think you bring up a couple good points. It's maybe a little bit about enforcement, and that's where the noise ordinance and where the words that are being used need to be identified. And so that puts, obviously more work on the city staff, whether it's in the code enforcement office and or the police department, be tasked with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I do want to point out a few things regarding that decision. First, there was a sign that was originally posted there regarding noise, and that was brought to the council telling us that's wrong and needed to be brought down, so we brought down. I do believe there's a difference between, I have neighbors behind me where there's noise all the time, so I understand about noise. The difference between either somebody buying a house next door that's noisy and students that change over every year that are noisy next year. That's one thing. You can go and talk to them, and you'll have to talk to them every year. But when you're talking about living up against the park, it's going to be a transient population every day, every hour. It's going to change over. And so I think having to go and talk with people on a basketball court is also, or a tennis court or wherever you're going, I don't know that it's going to be a realistic solution when there's a noise issue. I think the sign is a better solution for that. We did decide, I want to remind everybody that we did decide quite a while ago it was going to be a family play place with basketball nets there, not a basketball court like in the upper park. So there is a difference between the two. I think we've gotten away from that. The only difference is we didn't put lines down like on a basketball court, and we didn't, even though we wanted a family play place, we haven't included anything else yet. That was the intent. And lastly, I just want to remind everybody that just like most of our commissions, except for planning commission, zoning board, public service, there's a few of them. Parks and Rec is a commission that I give them a lot of credit for the work they do. They do the yeoman's work here, but Their job is to recommend to the council, and like any other board or commission, the council can either take that recommendation and improve it, but it's also possible that the council will not approve something or will discuss it and find that they aren't going to go anywhere with it. I mean, that's just the nature of the beast, unfortunately. So that's all I have.
So a couple of things that I'd like to see if I can get resolved. One is that the county opera money that we have requested and has been awarded to us is specifically through our request designated for the reconstruction, rehabilitation of the upper Wilbur Park basketball court and those other things that you've listed out, which will certainly make for a nicer and more connected park for everybody, especially those folks that play basketball. So there's that. The thing that I would like to see if I could get some answer to is relative to the largest piece that's still in the first tranche of the ARPA monies that we have designated for the park, and that's the bandstand. Several people, maybe all of you, I think, are aware that I had a conversation with an active community member who said, we can do that, we can build that. And what he wound up putting together an ad hoc committee, which, way to go, with the idea of not only providing this council with some plans and strategies and prices, and but also because there are monies that are already being targeted and in fact even have been collected for a stage, wherever it may be, that his feeling, this group's feeling, and my feeling, as uneducated as it may be, is that between those monies and the $235,000 that's designated, we may very well be able to have two bandstands, one of some consequence in size in the park, and another one smaller that would accommodate half a dozen folks performing that would be in fact movable in Muller Plaza. And they've done some nice work. They've only met once, and I've talked with these folks a couple of times, and they would like to know, can we meet again? There's no cost to the city for this. They simply want to present the city with options and prices and strategies. And I don't want to tell them yes or no until I know that this council is approving of that $235,000 designated for that.
I'll be vocal. So I think one thing that I would really like to say, and I can express this to you privately, is that I'd love to see the opportunity for us to hold ticketed events somewhere. So for me, you know, if that was something that would expand what we're able to offer. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think, you know, if we want to hear robust music in our community, that investing in those things is literally the very first step. So yeah, I mean, I think in terms of it being parts of the whole, what would that be best? For? Does that make sense? If we did 713 and we spent, I'm ready 75, that would be math in their head. Yes. Oh, right, I'm sorry, 279. Okay. .1, so we have about 400 left, is that right?
Out of my first half,
Yeah. 430, so that's like half of what we have left for Thunder Stretch, just to put it in perspective.
Yes, we've been talking about performance stages for 10 years now. So I think if we don't do this now, I don't know when we would do it. So I'm in favor of that.
Other questions on council? Yes, Scott.
Two things. One, with regards to the bandstand, I'm always open to at least get a budget. If someone wants to bring a price through, so we kind of know what we're looking at, that's never gonna hurt. But the second thing is more of to go back to what Katie was saying. With the night that the basketball court. The one thing that I don't know if you kind of said consensus, and my mind wasn't even made up yet that night. And I would just ask like, maybe a major thing like that, even though we wouldn't necessarily have to vote on it, maybe we should vote on it so that. You know, people know kind of like where we stand, because I got a lot of. Phone calls from down my area, and I'm like, well, I wasn't for or against, I was still trying to figure out and listening. It wasn't, you know, so I mean, just something to think about. I'm not saying anything was wrong or anything was. I probably wouldn't have known right up until you called my name, you know, I mean, I'd like to support. My fellow wards, but it was just, you know.
I think that's very valid. I've watched it, probably most council members did, the archive video, and as I watched that and looked around the dais and to see people's reactions. In retrospect, you know, Monday morning quarterbacking my own chairing of this council, I thought, you know, I might have pulled that trigger a little bit prematurely. So that's, I think that's a reasonable critique, and I appreciate that. And we will endeavor to do better. Anything else that we need to discuss? It sounds like, I hate to be fast, but it sounds like we may have a consensus that I might be able to yes, Mom.
Well, we may have consensus. I would like to just suggest that we don't have a blank check for 235, but we have consensus on a performance stage. And if they can bring that in lower than that 235, that would open up opportunities elsewhere. I think we have consensus on performance stage.
I think that's terrific. It allows me to let these folks continue the process, but bring that to us. We'll be able to make a determination. Yes, Jim.
I'm sorry, I just want to remind the council that for building the stage, we will have to do competition. It will have to go out
Sure.
for bid. So the criteria will be there for the council.
It's nice that the communities frankly volunteered to assist in this process, provide us with information. I find that incredible.
It's just that, I just wanted to remind everybody.
Yeah, got it.
Even if they start volunteering, if this particular group goes out and gets volunteers that are willing to put their labor, to volunteer their labor to build the 2 sound stages, we would have to go to bid for that.
I will have to investigate that. I'll probably have to refer to Dave Merzik's guidance on volunteering. And because we have to look, we could accept donations. But
Well, monetary, they could supply labor, and if you have to put a monetary down for the labor.
for a project that's over $200,000 or close to it, I want to just make sure, because I'm gonna have to report back to the United States Treasury.
For the use of our.
Yes, and I have to guarantee that all procurement was followed properly, so I just want to get my ducks in a row.
I'm only saying this because I think material costs are gonna come in much higher than $240,000, and that if we can accept labor, then I think it would help get this project to fruition.
They are also, as I mentioned, because they were looking at, there are 2 individuals that are owning onto icons that are, the intention is to honor each of them. One is Jeff Walker, the other one is Al Galladoro. And in the former case, there's already quite a bit of money that's already being contributed, and that's going to help.
So in the meantime, while they're working on that, I'll work on, you know, what we have to do to follow the donation of the labor, and if the city.
The answer you get depends on the question.
Right. And so we'll,
Depending on how it's shaped, how it's maintained, how it's allocated.
We may be putting
We'll-
I'm basically just asking,
Yeah.
can I let them continue the process of trying to determine, you know, costs within these strategies? And I feel like I've gotten an answer that's yes, I can ask them to continue that volunteer record. Terrific. Do we have any further discussion on ARPA, or are we set? Okay, I'm gonna very slowly going around the dais, so I'm gonna say that we're set. Okay, so
Set in the sense that.
set in the sense that we
We are
are,
on a list of projects.
these are our projects.
Is our priority or? I guess from my perspective, Lower Lake Trail Bridge, that's something that we've got pretty good estimate on. We can plan to move forward with that, construct that in 2023. You know, are we ready to move forward with that project? And then what about the other ones? Are we doing anything with those?
Let's put two trails together, right?
Basically, the bridge there with the upper Lower Lake. Pedestrian bike path, there's no bridge anymore, it fell apart. Once you're good long jumper.
Yeah, there's some, there's some that make me across. Not me.
Yeah, I mean, that's.
You're not recommending it, are you?
No, we're not recommending it.
So yeah, so that's what's next, the Lower Lake Bridge, in terms of, because you have like ranked fees, right?
Yeah, we put that in our order, and we're gonna go through one.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I wanted to throw the idea of expanding our community gardens in there, maybe instead of relocating the basketball court in Unitwell, or, you know, I don't know what the plan is with the money for the state park. I know we're not gonna have enough money to do sidewalks in Neowah. Do we want to move that higher on the list? Yeah, I feel like there's more discussion there in my mind, but those two projects, I would feel pretty thorough about. The Lower Lake Bridge and the stage.
I thought we were just moving forward on the stage with this ad hoc committee. I feel comfortable moving that forward.
That was my question, so that we resolve.
And then I guess I turn back to the liaison of the Parks and Rec Committee. I mean, this bridge, how critical is it in their master plan?
Oh, it's at the reservoir, not Lower Park, but I appreciate.
Don't they
you
oversee the trail system?
asking. Loosely. Not really. Yeah,
Nobody oversees the trail system?
no.
Not really.
There are like individual groups, right, that do, because there's,
So the trail system is comprised of several different entities that own the trails, being city, state, and private ownership. So I refer to trail system, we're talking about a lot of folks who talk about trails behind the park, that's a different entity, or I mean, that's us, it's the city. What I would propose, and I'll speak to my own thoughts about this, which I've made pretty public in our quality life infrastructure committee. I think we have a real opportunity to develop some of our watershed land, some of the trails up on East Street. And so the committee kind of asked me or tasked me, or maybe I volunteered to kind of look at the development of those. So I'm actually next week I'll be walking out there with a local group of former Siouxland students that now have a company to build mountain bike specific trails that are also great walkable trails. And I've sent them all the maps of kind of where we're talking about. They think there's some great opportunities there. They create grants, or they get grants to be able to fund building trails. So there's no kind of plan here. There's no, and of course, I need to run this past everybody, but the approval kind of began thinking about this. In my vision, we have an opportunity to be able to utilize the East Street land for some great trails. They connect into this Wilbur Park for both kind of recreational access by folks in the community, as well as maybe bring folks in that want to ride or run or walk in our trail system. So I would be a supporter of this because I think if we have a bit of a long-term vision towards this place being enhanced, I think we could have a really kind of interesting opportunity here in that particular area of our property, if you will.
There's nothing like the view of Wilbur Lake from the bridge, by the way. You know, just in terms of the quality of life picture. Just throw that out there as some of the visions that are there.
So,
Yes, Dave.
what's the deadline, Greg, on when we have to have everything designated, what we're using the funds for, of the first 713 that's left?
For all of the ARPA funds in 2024. You don't have everything submitted and filed, committed to what we're gonna spend it on. We have to spend the funds by the end of 2026.
I'm sorry, right?
We have to designate what we're spending money on by the end of 2024, but I'll spend everything by the end of 2026.
Oh,
So what else?
So out of what's left here between Neowah, I'm looking at your email, Neowah Park Performance Stage, the trail bridge replacement, basketball court number one relocation, the skate park rehab, playground improvements, and the sidewalk. What did we agree to do here? I mean, at the performance stage, I think we have an agreement. We have agreed, did it sound like we have agreement on the Trent Bridge replacement?
I think that was,
my question now.
Okay, that's something I've heard from constituents over the last couple of years, so they wanted it fixed. I don't know if anybody else has heard anything from it. A lot of people out there.
that was also a popular choice, I think, when you had posed. Vietnam about what we should submit to the county. I think that was either the most popular or the most popular choice.
But relative to the Wilbur Lake Bridge, I guess that's the thing where if we have agreement among council that is something that we can move forward to.
Yes.
I would agree with that.
Yes.
Yeah. Absolutely. We have any other agreement here on any of the remaining 4 items? I'm missing.
I gotta see the sidewalks and part of the.
Yeah.
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 You know, that's also a safety issue.
So that's 13,234.
That was the remainder,
Right.
but it's gonna cost me more than that.
Oh, I'm sure.
Just use the place at the bottom.
We could proceed with getting some ideas from the group that's working on the form stages, see what the cost might be, receiving bidding and constructing Wilbur Lake, and see where we're at. That point. We might not have much left.
Yeah, so we think that gets us to where we need to be for tonight. Let's see what we have. Get it on the side. So that's financial. So with that, then I think we'll end the discussion portion of the agenda, and I'll ask if there's any additional business.
I wanted to, I didn't really have the moment early on, returning to the very start of this meeting where we were informed by the gentleman from BSD that we had a clean audit, and really I wanted to thank you both and the rest of the finance team for that. And that's like, it's outstanding, and I think that he certainly can at that point to be able to have such a clean audit for several years running. So thank you very much for all the hard work that you all put into it starting in January, or sorry, in July. I also wanted to take the opportunity to thank Ms. Mercy for her generous gifts to the city. I appreciate her vision for the park and that particular area of the park. So I was really pleased to hear her interest in giving a gift to be able to create a gate for that. So if she's listening, my thanks. Thank you.
Yeah, since we were kind of talking about master plans for the parks, and Mark, you had brought up mountain biking. I wanted to ask about the track.
So trying to work with the OTA, the Oregon Trail Association, to work this kind of nonprofit group that we kind of work with us in the pump track, a little bit, kind of get that figured out at every level. The OTA had a lot of very good questions. We had to do a lot of kind of internal investigation here. I think we are now all in agreement that the OTA is very supportive of the pump track. What I've done now is to ask the ad hoc group that can put together to send me over different recommendations for grants that are out there, and I'm proceeding to begin to apply these grants. Most of the grants are starting the new year, so I do have a bit of time. My hope is to be able to have several grants submitted by their dates, hopefully early in the new year, and hopefully we can get something approved and we can begin to move forward, and the OTA would then receive that grant and kind of give it to the city to be able to do it. I do have a developer in mind. He has a lot of experience having worked in different pump tracks in New York State. He has a real kind of cheap model that he works on, a lot of volunteers, and really asks the kind of community that pitch in. I think we have the capacity to be able to do that. So I'm hopeful, hopeful we were gonna get this a while ago. But it seems like things are beginning to align that perhaps we can have this really best case scenario by April or by spring, I should say. And perhaps worst case scenario is by the fall, and that is being incredibly optimistic, but you know, I think that things are lining up. We just need to get the grant money to be able to support it. And we have not just a kind of proposal on a pump track, but an entire program trying to benefit the youth of Oneonta to be able to safely learn how to use a pump track and begin to develop some young cyclists.
Cool. Thank you.
I'd be happy to share that with you if anyone would like to see the kind of framework that I'll be sending out for the grant proposal. Okay.
Dave? Yeah, this is for Greg and Stephen, actually. My committee, a click had talked about both certified local government status, and there's also been the talk about from I think of 2000, their study to expand the historic districts or look to potentially expand the historic districts. I just want a point of clarification, and if either one of you can answer this would help me. Because the certified local government status for everybody else is with what comes with that is a local preservation board that would allow for a review of work or demo on historic buildings and would take care of some of the issues we've had over the years. But the certified local government status, we can't work on that until after I think of 2000 work is done. Is that true?
No.
Okay.
Certified local government is a program for National Park Service that's administered through SHPO, where the local government is able to basically have an architectural review board for locally designated historic districts. Those districts are created by that board, typically in conjunction with pre-surveyed historic districts, which are National Register districts, which are downtown and Walnut Street currently are.
Okay. Has any work been done toward obtaining that status yet? Or is that something that we need to have?
That has to go to the legislative committee on November 4th, which I think is on the agenda.
It is on the, okay,
Yeah.
all right, great,
So we have an ordinance that was reviewed by SHPO
okay,
that theoretically could be approved by our local government, by the council.
okay.
That has been sitting in limbo for more than a year.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
We talked about that.
Sitting where?
in limbo.
Anything more, Jay?
No, I look forward to talking about it. Glenn?
Just want to give a shout out to the Noah's World, the board. They had a trunk and treat on Saturday. Obviously, it helps them have a beautiful day, but there was more than 270 kids. So many that they have to create a schedule. It was kind of cool. My son and daughter-in-law and we participated. It was just amazing to see all the kids in their outfits. But yeah, 270 plus kids who showed up to Noah's World.
Scott. So I'm gonna give a shout out to Oneonta Fire Department. They came down to Oneonta Boys and Girls Club, so I guess it's a shout out to the Boys and Girls Club too. For their trunk and treat, and they had carved pumpkins and they were getting right into it. I think the fire department had just as much fun as the kids did, and I did not go to the parade, but I saw the pictures and stuff of the ladder truck coming down through with smoke coming off of it, and it was very nice to see. I don't think I've ever seen a city fire truck dressed up before, and it was just, it's great to see the community engagement coming from our departments. It's,
Nobody does have any better. Do we have any other council members that want to share anything? Okay, do we have any correspondence? We have no correspondence. Is there any need for an executive session?